Yeah.
Okay. Okay, I'm Violet, and I did not prepare this as a presentation, which is why I had this sent out ahead of time, because this is a dialogue, and that is what I want, a dialogue. So hopefully folks have had a chance to read and think. I'm interested in your ideas, your thoughts, your questions. The only thing I'll say is that when we look at the continuous mutual process of human and environmental energy fields, that is the heart of Rogerian nursing, of the science of unitary human beings. And that is integrality. And then we have resonancy flowing with integrality, the continuous blowing in lower and higher frequency wave patterning. And then we have helice, the increasingly diverse, unpredictable, creative changes in that wave patterning that's always going on. And none of this would be happening without the four postulates. We have to have the energy fields. We have to have openness. We have to have this idea of pan-dimensionality where time and space really, they're only perceptual boundaries. They are not actual boundaries. And we have to have patterning, or none of this would be happening. And the examples that I gave, again, two of them from me, and there are multiple examples that I could give from my personal experiencing, and then one from people that I know very well. But I am sure that everyone on this dialogue has had similar experiences, because you wouldn't be here if you were not open and if you were not aware of things beyond yourself. And so I love to hear, and we've already started to hear some of that sharing of experiences that people have had that really are reflective. And certainly, I'm sorry John's not here. John Phillips, he was going to try to be here, but I guess he just wasn't able to make it this evening because of his integral awareness. He has given us so much more to think about in terms of Rogerian nursing science, which is why that book is of such value. But I really want to open this up to discussion and to hear from people, a back and forth in terms of what people would like to share, what their ideas are, what their questions are, because integrality to me really is a living thing that we all experience probably every day, whether we are actually aware of it or not. So I don't want to do all the talking. I want to do a lot of listening and sharing as others share along the way. So whoever wants to take it on, please be my guest.
I'll speak up because I want to kind of tack on to something that Wayne had mentioned earlier. So just some background. So my family is from Jamaica. So I'm part of the first generation that's in the States. So in the Caribbean, there's a lot of superstition, obviously. So why not? I'm right there with you in understanding kind of like how our backgrounds can really influence our, nature, so to speak. But one of the earliest stories I can remember my parents telling me, and I vaguely remember, but I don't necessarily remember. It's more like I'm sure patches of the memories that they told me. Um, was my mom was pregnant with my sister, who is 3 or 4 years younger than me. And my mom, just for context, had asthma. And so she had really bad asthma. During pregnancy, obviously, things like asthma, any problem you have gets much worse. So she was late in her pregnancy and really hadn't been to term yet. But essentially woke up one night having an asthma attack. And my mom, being the person that she is, gets up, like the hospital's right down the street. She gets her clothes on, runs to the hospital. She's like, I'm not waiting. I'm not waking anyone up. I'm going. So now, there's me and my dad running after her, like, oh my God, what's this woman doing? Why is she running to the hospital? And so long story short, everything ended up being okay. But what I kept telling her when we got to the hospital is that my sister's dying. My sister's dying. And my mom's like, stop saying that. Like now you're making things worse. Why are you saying that? And I remember vaguely throughout my mom's pregnancy, I would always put my head on her belly and say, like, oh, my sister's in there. And my mom was a person that was just like, I'm not getting the gender. I don't want any of that. I just want to have a baby and then we'll deal with it from there. And so I'm saying this in front of like the entire medical team. And eventually my mom gets sent back to her room and she, gets all the tests done, gets a sonogram. And essentially the physician tells her the cord is wrapped around the baby's neck. The heart rate is completely off. Like you have broken your water. It's way too early. We're gonna have to do an emergency C-section. And for context, my mom had given birth naturally to me, so this was like completely not what she was expecting, especially as an immigrant woman in this country, not expecting an emergency C-section. And essentially, everything ended up being fine. And my mom, the first thing she asked the surgeon was, "Let me see the genitalia. I have to see." Because she was like, "There's no way this is a girl. This boy has been sitting here saying this is like his sister the whole time." And lo and behold, it was my sister. And she was dying. The cord was wrapped around her neck. And as a 3-year-old, I don't know why I knew that. I don't know why that was, something that I would say to my mom, who's obviously struggling enough, being almost to term pregnancy and having an asthma attack. But I think that was one of my early experiences with that kind of integral process of being part of your mother, right? Being part of your parents and really feeling things that maybe they don't even know that they feel because it's, maybe not in the forefront of their mind or anything like that. And I think that, again, being raised in a, pretty superstitious household, it's like I've always been around that kind of, if I dream and I see someone, that means something. If I hear someone calling my name and they're not actually calling my name, that means something. Um, and as I've gotten older, even just being personally, pagan, that is a really big part of who I am and my personal philosophy. And I think it's played a huge impact and role in how I navigate nursing. And so when I got into my PhD program and, Dane was like, "Oh yeah, like there's this theory that I think, might align with your thoughts." Um, it was just very refreshing in a way that I didn't know could be refreshing. And nursing to me has always been first career. When you get into your BSN, like you're first looking for your career, your profession. And it never felt like it was integral, so to speak, with like who I was. And so I think it's really just powerful in a unique way. I really don't know how to describe it, but it's really been something where even as I'm reading like through Roger's text, like I feel connected to this person, I've never met, this person whose name, really was not a name that I'd heard spoken very often in my education. So it just really, to make it a much shorter story, it just has been a very powerful, progress and process coming into this part of nursing. So just wanted to share that little backstory, but I think Wyona, like I definitely am there with you with those kind of weird experiences that end up meaning something in the grand scheme of things. So.
Right. Magic and mystery become pan-dimensional awareness, and something that all of us have the ability, if we are open and allow ourselves to experience and not try to shut it off and say something is definitely wrong here. Thank you. That was a great example. Yes, Patricia.
What it made me think about is you picking up changes in the patterning in the field. So the energy that you were experiencing, being close to your mother and the situation, the field was being repatterned than what you were used to. So you were picking up some of these changes. So I think patterning is really an important part of Martha's theory.
And also the idea, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. Yeah, no, I'm finished. I just was
Okay.
thinking of the patterning and the energy fields.
Okay, I just wanted to say that Martha was very clear in her writing that when she talked about the human energy field, it wasn't just an individual. It could be a family, a group, a community.
Yeah.
However, people wanted to identify that energy field, and a family is most definitely an energy field to look at. And the other thing, this is just my own, I guess, maybe pet peeve, so I'll just say it. Martha did not have a theory. What she has is far broader than theory. If you want to use Jacqueline Fawcett's designation, you would do the idea of a conceptual model from which multiple theories flow. She talked about it as a science. And so it's erroneous to say that the science of unitary human beings is a theory. because she herself identified 3 theories, and many, many other people have identified theories that flow from the science. So it is far broader
There's science.
than a
Yeah.
theory. Yeah,
Mhm. Okay.
that's just my pet peeve.
No, but the language is important, and
It is. Yes.
yeah.
I think Shirley Conrad has her hand up. Shirley?
Yeah, I was just going to share when we're talking about field, I had experience as far as a non-local. And so when I was doing research and was conducting the interviews over the phone, I can remember this one particular interview I was having. I could tell there was something else going on. And I went ahead and finished my interview guide, finished the interview according to the research, stopped the recording. And then this individual and I had a conversation, and I kind of shared some questions and hunches that I had. And we had the most delightful conversation about similar challenges that we were both dealing with COVID and vaccination. And both of our parents, our fathers, were sick and close to death. And these were just things that I was picking up in the interview that really weren't part of the research, that we were then able to have a nice conversation with later, that makes me think of the non-local field and how we can pick that up as well.
Mhm. I thought I saw another hand up, did I?
That was just me, Violet, wanting to just say the 3 theories that Martha felt originated from her science. Was that Parsi, Watson, and
Oh, no, they developed
Butler?
their
Oh,
own
they
theories.
developed their own?
Yeah,
Cool.
no,
it-
um,
Butler, or
Okay.
sorry,
her theory of evolution,
Right.
it was evolution, but it really is the theory of accelerating change rather than accelerating evolution, because she got rid of the word evolution. So there's her theory of accelerating change.
Okay.
There's her theory of the paranormal, and then the theory that talks about the manifestations of change, greater diversity, lesser diversity, etc. So those are the 3 that she identified.
thank you.
It
Thank you.
used to be called the correlates of change, and then she changed that to the manifestations of change.
Thank you.
So I'm having trouble finding the raise hand button, but I have
Oh,
a
I'm sorry.
question.
Theodore,
Violet.
go ahead.
Call me Teddy. You were talking about how Martha describes the human energy field as it can be an individual, a family, a community. But isn't it also, I mean, the way I feel it, and I believe she conceptualized it, is that it cannot exist without integrality with the environment at the same time. The energy
Oh, of course.
field
Yeah.
is totally connected. It doesn't exist separately.
Right. That's the continuous mutual process, human and environmental. So it's just that within that, if you're talking about human, don't make the mistake, as some people do, of thinking that she's only talking about an individual. That human energy field can be a group, a family, a community.
I found that since I've been meditating, which is a number of years now, about 3 years, that the main realization that I have is my connection with the environment.
Mm-hmm.
I don't exist without it. We move along together. you know, um, the wind goes through the trees, and I feel it, and it affects my own patterning. I was thinking about it just the other day as we had our 7th or 8th straight day of rain with no sun, and how it affects our mood. Very Rogerian situation.
Yeah, and most definitely the well-becoming of the human and the well-becoming of the environment go hand in hand. You can't have one without the other.
Violet, I posted a question to everyone in the chat. How do all of you embrace or engage with the Indigenous population who are very connected to the environment and with energy? because I can say in Canada, this has become a really important part of who we are as educators in nursing, who we are as part of the global citizenship. It's who we have become because we've been shaken aware that we need to engage.
You may be further ahead then in Canada, because certainly there are pockets here, and there is a lot more focus on Indigenous communities and what they bring to the environment, and stepping back and letting the healing of the environment. I mean, it's the Indigenous peoples who are considered to be such a big force in that, but I don't know. Other people, do you have other perceptions of that from your own places?
I was just writing in chat, but I'll just pop in quickly. And Anne Marie, please feel free to join. Anne Marie and I have a paper upcoming in Visions, which is basically writing up a talk that we gave a couple of conferences ago and have been working closely with other people in SRS, including Violet, on the whole idea of anti-racism, praxis, and, you know, appropriation of Indigenous ways of knowing in traditional nursing theory, which I think, especially Rogerian science, which uses non-traditional ways of knowing, and the importance of, you know, citing Indigenous scholars, Black and other nurses of color, and really being open to the ways that nursing historically in its thinking practices has many times, you know, co-opted or appropriated, you know, knowledge. And I'm not saying that Martha Rogers did, but I think we all know, you know, that the theory movement and much of the knowledge was built at a time when it privileged some and excluded many. And I think that, you know, to answer that really important question, I think we just have to get better at using other, you know, Indigenous scholars and citing them and understanding ways in which, you know, that maybe those knowledge systems were co-opted over the years. And that's, you know, my opinion, but we also touch on that, Anne Marie and I, in our upcoming paper. I don't know, Anne Marie, do you want to say anything else? Maybe she's.
Yeah, no, I was on mute. I think you said it all, and I think one of the starting points for us to write this paper is also the principle of integrality, and knowing that what happened to one affect everyone, even when the experience might not be the same, but that we have to take these issues into account and address them. And we think that, you know, the science of interhuman beings is a good framework to address this, you know, these issues.
Yeah, I just want to kind of, you know, add to that, because I think, Jane, and Anne Marie, that's a good point, because it's one of the things that in our philosophy course, I'm working with Jane Flanagan on publishing a paper that I had written for the course. It's on African Indigenous philosophies and their influence on nursing and Western science. And I think a lot of the times when we talk about indigeneity, people become very kind of like, you know, nearsighted on the American Indigenous experience, but really, you know, there's a world of Indigenous experience that we don't know. And I think what's happened a lot of the times is these things, these ways of knowing, these ways of being influence us in these subtle ways. And, you know, I'm sure Martha Rogers would, you know, speak to that as being, you know, the integrality of the world. But, you know, I think about nurses like Sojourner Truth and Harriet Tubman, and people who were nurses but are not often credited with being nurses, was credited with, you know, their role in abolition movements and you know, working towards the end of slavery, but really who were nurses. And it's like, what were their philosophies? What were their ways of knowing? What were their ways of being that influenced nursing in their way? And how can we then, you know, move that forward to help teach new nurses? And so I think that, I don't know if this is necessarily an answer to the question, but I think part of it comes down to really understanding the context and how things are connected. You know, I think about all the indigenous people in this country who were indigenous to other lands or who are indigenous to this land, who were ripped away from their way of being. And, you know, in being integral with their environments, right? What does that do for the rest of the world? None of these things are happening in a vacuum. You know, like the energy of the world now has to contend with environments that were ripped apart, that were integral and you know, whole in their own way of the people and animals and things like that. And as a psych nurse practitioner, I think that's something I think about often. You know, when I see kids coming in, you know, really, really suffering, I think first, you know, there's a family dynamic in this community and things like that that are happening, but there's millennia before them of pain and suffering and, you know, rapid industrialization and deforestation and all these things of this big ecosystem that is one world. And I think that's where, for me, integrality becomes so key. It's like I have to think about that in the context. It's my care plan, my you know, approach is no longer just the system and the family, but the world. You know, I have to talk to them about what's happening in the world affecting you? How historically has this affected you? So yeah, I think really what it comes down to is just understanding the interconnectedness of everything, the integrality of everything. I have to keep coming back to that because it's really the main topic. But in understanding that for indigenous people across the world, you know, this disconnection that's happened, it really has an impact on all of us. And so it behooves us to really be concerned with, you know, how we navigate the culture and the stealing of culture and stealing of land and all these things, because it affects all of us. So that's a really long-winded way of saying what I had to say, but Jane, I really wanted to corroborate what you were saying.
Thank you, Taylor. Other examples from people of living integrality. Yes, Patricia, did you? Oh, no, you didn't have a hand up. Sorry.
Yeah, I can give one of several examples. When I was doing my master's, this was many years ago, I was on a clinical unit every Monday for hospice and hospice. And of course, in Canada, you know, it wasn't like here where, you know, unless you have terrible symptoms, you know, you have to be hospice at home. At the time, there were different people there. But anyway, I came on the unit and this woman came rushing out. The nurse, can you help me? I said, well, of course, what can I do? Will you watch my brother for me while I run to the restroom? So I said, absolutely. So she goes running. I walk in, he's in Cheyenne-Stoke. The lighting is really bad in the room. The drapes, angel lighting. I've just put angel lighting in place. I have not looked at him again. I saw his face. He was just in agony. Agony was all over his face. And so lighting changed. And then I noticed he had a big cassette player back in the day, and you take the cassettes, and he had about 100 cassettes in a box. And I had never done music therapy before. Okay, so I'm going, okay, I'm learning all these new modalities. Let me try music. So I picked out one of those cassettes from the middle. And I'm really, as I'm saying this, I'm being very careful. I have to pick out I have to get the right cassette. So I get it and I play it. And I'm telling you, maybe 2 strands into it, she's behind me saying, what have you done? And of course, I'm jumping out of my skin thinking, oh my God, I shouldn't have touched this cassette player. But I turn around and he's peaceful. And she said, how did you know? How did you know? And I said, how did I know what? She said, how did you know to pick that cassette? That's his music. Out of all those cassettes, that's his music. That's the music he wrote. Mm-hmm. And so I think when, you know, you're really, really open, you're doing, I want to say, I felt like I was doing strange things. Why am I doing this, right? And so often that strange thing was obviously the right thing to do, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the kind of stories you wanted, Violet?
Definitely.
Oh my God, Winona, you are the most channeling, beautiful individual of Martha Rogers. I'm just feeling your energy. Mm-hmm. Oof, your stories are so powerful. Mm. Thank you.
Yes.
I'll tell you, Arlene, what maybe makes them more powerful too is I've just come through my own journey with cancer. And Rory knows, she's been a cheerleader for me. I was diagnosed October 18th of 22 with stage 4 cancer with mets to the liver. So I was dealing in the end with 10 tumors, 2 to the colon and 8 to the liver. And so I just did intuitively what I thought was right. I told everybody, so I had all the people I could. Oops, is that someone's phone? All the people I could in the world knew my story. You know, I asked for prayer. So I had this huge support group, positivity radiating through me, you know, thinking of the chemicals that radiate from the brain into you and energy. And my friend Diane, who was also a radical remission in cancer, by the way. I have nothing for the last 6 months. So Diane, she would email me occasionally. She was radical in remission herself. And she would always email right when I needed it most. You know, you're having a bad day with a student, you're kind of like on the anger side, and you're okay. And she would always knew when to just give me a couple lines of that encouragement to remind me that my holistic, my nurses from American Holistic Nurses Association were definitely there with me, and their energies were with me. And so really, Radical Hope is a book that talks about the 10 alternative treatments that those of us use from 10,000 survivors. And it was things like remaining positive, having a really big group, you know, spirituality, having long-term goals. I want to teach for 10 more years, you know. So here I was intuitively doing everything on the list. And yeah, buy the book, it's really good. But yeah, it was, so I think that, thank you, Arlene. I think maybe I'm able to maybe radiate even more after having lived through this. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Iona. That's a beautiful example.
I can follow up on Wyona's example because it's also an example of when I was with a patient, very young nurse. I was probably in my first year of you know, nursing after graduating, very soon after graduation. And we were sitting at, you know, then you sat around and you received your assignment. And there was a patient that nobody wanted. And her name was Rita. And all of the nurses were calling her a vegetable. And she was totally, you know, total care. And she had a trach, and her diagnosis was a subarachnoid hemorrhage, and you know, didn't have much cognitive ability. And so I said I would take Rita. So I was in with Rita for a very, very long time, giving her morning care. And you know, I was tending to her trach and giving her a bath, and she looked at me but wasn't responsive in any other way, kind of opening, closing her eyes. And the cassette tape also was off to the side, and for some reason I put the radio on. It wasn't a tape, it was a radio. So turned the radio on, and music came on, and I looked at her, and tears just flowed out of her eyes. And I said, Rita, do you know this song? And she mouthed to me, Carolina Moon. She didn't say it, of course, but she mouthed the words. And it was just an incredible moment, you know, of being right with her, and even not knowing why I would turn that, you know, that radio on at that time.
Mm-hmm. Rory?
I have one to share that is actually not too long ago. As I said, I'm in St. Martin, and in oh God, what year? 2013, we had Hurricane Irma, which destroyed our home here and also was just awful, and the rest of the island. Many people were killed, many people lost everything, and people were terribly traumatized. And my husband and I really wanted to do something. He's a physician, I'm a psych nurse, he's a psychiatrist, and we couldn't practice, we couldn't see patients because of licensure restrictions. So I spent a lot of time trying to figure out what agency we could do something with. And St. Martin is divided in a Dutch side and a French side. And the French side is French speaking. My husband speaks French, but nonetheless, when we met people from the hospital, they said, oh my God, we would love to have you work at the hospital, but you can't do that. So I found an agency on the Dutch side that spoke English. And we worked out a plan that we could do classes for the staff that was incredibly traumatized. So we planned a series of, I think, 4 or 5 classes. And when we went to the first one, we walked in, and this goes back to some of the things that you're talking about in indigenous populations and Caribbean populations. The staff was primarily Caribbean Black. So we walk in, and these 2 white people, and we're going to teach them something, right? And they're all looking at us like, yeah, right. And everybody, they're all traumatized. They're all exhausted. They've been working 12-hour shifts for weeks, and sharing, units, and they were real. In their own homes, many of them had been devastated. So we told them a little bit about our background and that we had done work after Hurricane Katrina as mental health work, and that we had wanted to do something because we loved St. Martin, had been coming here for 30 years, and that we had lost our home as well. And we knew that, many of them had also lost their home. And I think about Madeline Leininger often, and she was my faculty, my supervisor when I was at the University of Colorado many, many, many years ago now. And I just thought, this is trying to pattern the field. This is trying to be part of their field. And from then on, they were very open with us. They told us of their own experiences, what they were struggling with. We were able to also give them some content about things about grief, stress. We did some meditation stuff with them. And at the end of our little thing, they gave us a party. The cook cooked donuts and coffee and what have you. And they gave us a little painting that one of the patients in the day hospital had painted and said, I want those people who came to have that painting. So it hangs in our apartment today.
That's lovely. Mm-hmm.
But without being sensitive and without, and I'm very grateful to Madeline Leininger for the anthropological cultural background that I got from her. But also, the whole issue of energy patterning, being aware of the field, and what's in the field, how you can influence the field or not, was just very, very useful in that situation. Plus, our own field was very disrupted. Our own stress was over the top at the time as well.
Does the way that I've talked about integrality make sense to people? Is it something, it seems to be everybody can relate, but I just wanted to be sure to see if anyone had any questions.
Jane Hopkins Walsh, is this a opportune time for you to kind of talk a second or two about the upcoming SRS conference?
So I'm actually mobile right now. I don't know how good my internet is, but I think there's not much more to say other than what we put in chat. The conference committee is meeting monthly, and as soon as we have a theme, that will go out to the membership. If you're not a member, I've already shared the link for the SRS membership, and that's a way to stay up to date with all the happenings. But I think just, for all of us here that are gathered, there's so much richness in ideas. And I think for people just to think how it could translate to a possible abstract for the conference.
Violet, I think that, you shared your experiences with integrality. And, we always kind of raise questions about how can we make these abstract principles clear for our students or other nurses that we're talking with. And I think the way that you did it in sharing experiences is one way, or sharing stories, practice stories, would be a way that we might make these, abstract principles come to life for our students.
Right. Yeah, and I really found that students began to look at the science differently when they would think about examples from their own lives. The ones that I talked about are the ones that came up the most. At the time, people weren't talking about texting, but they could certainly relate to that idea that they just have a sense that they needed to speak with someone, and they go to call that person and the person is calling them, or that sense that someone in their family is in trouble. And then they find that a child has been taken to the emergency room, or somebody even clear across the globe, because time and distance don't matter, that there was a traumatic event and that the person has died. And a number of people could relate to that, knowing I knew my grandfather passed before I learned factually that he had. I knew, and he came to say goodbye. I felt him. And that kind of thing really, I think, makes it alive for people. And again, there are so many people, because they're coming from a very different mindset, that find those things crazy, that they don't believe it, they think you're making it up. If it happens to them, they become frightened. Who was it? I'm blocking his name now, but that psychiatrist and his group who talked about the idea that for so many people who are going through a spiritual emergence, if they get caught in that process, either because, thank you, Stanislaus Grof, thank you. Either because they themselves start to wonder about themselves because of what they're experiencing, or they get people around them questioning what they're experiencing and being ready to cart them off to the mental institution or something. They get stuck in something called spiritual emergence. The schizophrenic is drowning in the same sea in which the mystic swims with delight. Anybody remember who said that? Was it Jacob Needleman? Or, well, it was somebody who said that. I don't remember offhand, but it's that same kind of an idea. Yeah.
Martha said things about that too. Like, I remember saying the schizophrenic is the hope for the future or something.
That's right. Yeah. And she said it wasn't Freud, it was fraud.
I'm so interested in how to facilitate this growth and awareness with our students. It seems like so many that get it have already explored some of the paranormal, or have had a paranormal experience that they never spoke about, or but how do we facilitate this way of being, this growth and awareness that our students can pay attention to more, of our ability to deeply connect with our patients in awareness of integrality and be able to hear or discover and trust grabbing the tape that's the tape that person needs to hear, or turning the radio on, or that's something that I think that we can really dialogue about, of teaching that the lived experience of pan-dimensional awareness, and growing that as certainly within our praxis and our disciplinary knowledge.
Yeah, I think, Dorothy, that's really important. And I think also if teaching students and nurses, to trust their feelings, their instincts. What are they feeling other than I've got to get this done, I've got to get that done, and running all the time, which is a systems issue.
Yeah.
Oh, so I think, Patricia, are you speaking?
Yes,
Can you-
I'd like to add to that too, because I have grave concerns about nursing education's emphasis today on competence, which is certainly necessary. We know that for quality and safety, but the overarching goal of competence to me seems very final. And the things that bring us to these intense encounters, are, as we've used the word, emerging. I actually have a note on my desk from a quote from Marlene that describes students as creative emerging, in a process of creative emergence. And I look at that often when people are making judgments about students, when they're kind of blocking off, I think, their feelings and their ability to grow. And I have a story similar to Marlene's that, now to me, it seems like I was very young, but at the age of 23 or so as an ICU nurse, I remember clearly, and I've told this story, I know Sylvia's on the call and has probably heard it before, but I had already positioned a young woman who was extremely critically ill. It was in the ICU, positioned her body, and I went in later within like 15 or 20 minutes to observe her vital signs. And in those days, this is a very long time ago, so it was still interesting to have so much technology, but she was on a cooling blanket, so I saw her temperature. She was on what they called a squawk box, so I heard blood pressure and saw her monitor. And I stood there in the realization that because I had already positioned her and I was observing these vital signs, there was no reason for me to really touch her. And I could not believe that would be happening. That as a nurse, I wouldn't, of course, and I did, of course, put a caring related touch on her arm for her to know that I was there. But nowadays, I am hearing some nurses say to me, I know what I do is just menial. And I say back, anything in the service of another human being could never be considered menial, and trying to elevate their vision of our beautiful discipline. But it's sometimes a heavy task because we have marginalized nursing theory and philosophy, and those of us that are valiantly trying to keep it in every encounter we have with our students, sometimes are having a struggle. And I think that the philosophy and the theory and the wisdom, that is what's going to bring us back in these times when we're greatly challenged.
And particularly when you mention the students being in this process of emergence, and how can we facilitate this in a curriculum process that we're encouraging the education of their pan-dimensional awareness starting in the first class. And so, as so many have said, this is a way of being. And how do we continue to cultivate it? Yeah, that's wonderful dialogue about that.
Sylvia wanted to get in there.
Yeah, thanks. I see someone else has their hand up.
Oh, sorry.
So beautifully said. I think, I can remember in similar many years ago, back in the 80s in the ICU, and I had the experience where somehow I didn't even realize it, but I was stabilizing patients just by being and touching people and having that ability to, I wouldn't say, I mean, in some way, there was a healing touch that was happening, and I didn't realize it until many years later that so much of what Martha Rogers has described in her science to me, as when I said earlier, I see it everywhere, I think that's what is nursing. And I think that we've just gone far away from the core, as beautifully as Pat Porter is telling us, that we're losing it through the mechanistic actions of competencies that we're trying to teach with the AACN Essentials, and the complete loss of the essence of what we're actually doing with people is forming connections and working with their energy in a healing way that probably many scientists still can't explain today, but somehow nurses seem to be cognizant of it in our ability to make those meaningful connections and improve healing in some meaningful way.
It's that mutual human environmental field process. Sharon. Sharon? Did we lose Sharon?
Sorry, I'm right here.
Oh, okay.
I'm teaching in a program that the students learn personal knowing and ethical knowing, and all 4 basic patterns of knowing before they even get into any of the other aspects of nursing, the medical aspects. And what I've seen is we lost our identity. I mean, we don't help students identify as healers. I think it's just what you were saying, Sylvia, and their background, where we come from as healers, and teaching how to be present to themselves, use of intent, reflection, and dialogue with themselves to begin. So it's really a process of developing the capacity of that student to manifest what is their inner being and their compassionate healer within. And we're not teaching that. So I think that's a very important part that's missing.
Megan?
Oh, yes. Well, I was along what Sharon had just said. I think that your the whole structure, the whole machine of academia elevates intellectual knowing, and success is still very much, despite what we're all talking about, measured by that in most programs. And to offer something that begins to say, okay, how do you know what you know? How do we know what we know? Ways of knowing. Because you don't understand this pan-dimensional field through the intellect. You don't even understand it emotionally. It's entering into this other dimension of being that is not encouraged or explored. Maybe in little ways, but it's little ways that get swallowed up within this larger structure of intellectual knowing. So that's what I'm so interested in elevating methods of discovery, expanding that to embodiment and intuitive, and the mythic, the magic. There's all of these elements that we have to begin to introduce into curriculum to point to. And the other piece is this we're inheriting this fear. That's an old constructed program. That fear that says, oh, I'll be schizophrenic, or, that the fear of entering into the unknown, this field of spaciousness, right? The phenomenological interface where you're meeting this implicate, this hollow movement, right? That is a whole other kind of development. That's a whole other kind of becoming that I think we can find ways to begin to bring it in. And what a gift to give students to say, who are you and how do you know? And so the fear piece, I wanted to say something about the fear piece. I remember, so, you know, I did a lot of training, professional training in psychosynthesis, working with clinical meditation and imagery. And there was always that one fear of the facilitator. Am I bringing somebody into a place that they won't be able psychologically to handle these experiences? And we hear a lot of now about people using therapeutic psychoactive substances, and then nurses are training how to talk people out of these experiences now, what are they, but anyhow, one of the things is we fear that we won't be able to handle it. We fear the information may be too much for us. We fear that I'm going to be changed. We fear that somebody's going to say, oh, that's strange, or you're weird, and we'll be kind of condemned. We've all had those experiences. Yeah. But I remember Richard Chow, when we were teaching psychosynthesis, he quoted, I think it was Saint Teresa of Avila, and it was, she would describe, they're like, when this information is about your own expansion for yourself and for the world. You know it, and you know it because it feels that it knows you intimately. It's for the sake of the future. I mean, there are criteria that we can start to be exploring to get rid of this obstacle of fear that we have about introducing these things, So, yeah.
Thank you, Megan. You've given us a lot to think about. Thank you. Arlene.
Thank you. Thank you very much to everyone. I know we're coming to the end of our evening, but I just wanted to say, as I've been listening to everybody and looking at everyone's pictures on the screen, how are we supporting our new and upcoming clinical instructors? How are we supporting and engaging with new faculty that are coming in? Because they don't have all of this wonderful information that maybe we've accrued over the years, because we have a bit more time on the continuum of learning that they have had. And sometimes I feel that we expect a lot of our clinical instructors who spend a lot of time with our students. We expect a lot of sessional instructors who maybe have never been mentored, never been really part of the program, but we bring them in because we're needing instructors to teach our students. So I wonder, how much can we give of ourselves to just connect with them and say, go with your spirit, go with the flow of what you have known, what you've experienced in your own careers, and share that with your students, because it might be invaluable. And I think sometimes we who maybe have more education, have had more time in the world of curriculum, developing curriculum, I think we need to share what we know with our younger colleagues who really want to do their very best, but don't have a lot of guidance. So that's just my comment.
Thank you. I'd also like to acknowledge Marlon LaForest, who I believe joined us late.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Yes, I joined late, and this is my first time joining you. I think I was introduced to this group by Dr. Leveillé, and I signed up last year to be a member. And I don't recall receive anything from you until I receive the note about this meeting. But I'm glad that I was able to join. A bit late, but I'm enjoying what I am here so far. I am a nurse midwife. I work at Jacobi Medical Center. I've been a midwife there for almost 22 years. Prior to that, I was a nurse I always work in the Bronx. I work at St. Barnabas Hospital for 14, 15 years. Then I decided to become a nurse midwife. So what you are talking about, the meaningness, the mindfulness is close to home. And I'm happy to hear this conversation, and I'm enjoying it.
Well, thank you for joining us. I'm sorry that we haven't done a better job of pulling you into the organization. We'll have to take a look at that, but welcome. And I hope you will come back in 2 months to the next dialogue.
All right. Thank you so much.
Welcome. Okay. Marlene, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I wanted to say something, and it's that, in our discussions about the movement toward competency-based learning and, and the AACN essentials, please remember that there's the first domain is knowledge for nursing practice. And what we're talking about is nursing knowledge. And so according to the AACN essentials, we bring this knowledge to our curriculum. That's what we need to be teaching, exactly what we're talking about. So it is aligned with the new essentials.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank everybody for coming. I mean, I really appreciate your willingness to share. I've enjoyed listening to everyone. I hope everyone will come back in 2 months. I don't know what our topic will be, but we do have these dialogues every 2 months. And I'd love to see everyone back. I think this is one of our biggest groups so far, and it's really great. It's been a wonderful group to be with. And again, thank you. I've enjoyed meeting all of you, and I hope that you will stay plugged into SRS. I hope everyone has gotten John's wonderful book, Evolving Rogerian Nursing Science, John R. Phillips' Unique Contributions, because there is a wealth of information in there for everyone. And I hope to see everyone at our next October conference. We should be coming up with the theme soon and letting everyone know what it is and putting out the call for abstracts to address that theme. So be watching. Okay. Patty?
Can we invite interested students to come to these dialogues?
Oh,
even though
yes.
they're not members?
Oh, no, of course. These are open. Yeah,
Very good.
definitely. They would be welcome.
So Teddy, if you have their email addresses, you can just send the invitations that I send out on to your students. And that goes for everyone who's teaching. So we would welcome that. The more the merrier.
Terrific. Thank you.
And if you have ideas for a dialogue, what you'd like us to focus on, please send them forward. To Patty, could send them to Patty or to me. Yeah.
Well, it looks like it's 6 o'clock at night, and I think we've covered a lot tonight. Thanking everybody again. Like Violet said, a couple of months from now, I'll send another invitation for April. And as soon as this recording is done, I send it to someone else, and then our plan is to put this onto the SRS website. When that happens, I will send an email out to all in case you want to share this evening's recording with your students or whomever.